can this possibly portend, you might ask? Then again, you might not ask. Doesn't matter, because the answer is coming at you right now, in the here, in the real, on the internet. It's time for the next segment of the ANTiSEEN Shoot interview series, brought to you by me, the current bass player and minister of propaganda from ANTiSEEN Incorporated, at your service. Yes, Malcolm Tent, the man who not only wears his own t-shirt, but unashamedly, unabashedly wears the t-shirt for his own record store. Yes, Trash American Style. Some of you old-timers and world travelers might remember the brick-and-mortar wonder that was Trash American Style, and is currently an earth-shattering presence on the internet. Look us up, because one of my very few joys in life, believe me, very few joys in life, besides sitting around talking about ANTiSEEN history, is selling records. And the only way I can do it is if you, the vinylophiliac, support me, the record enabler. So yeah, Trash American Style, my shirt, my store, my problem, hopefully yours as well. So yeah, man, we've been digging deep into the family tree of the almighty ANTiSEEN for quite a while now. And today, I am very happy to have the results of having met this guy in person for the first time in many years, a few months back, reaching out and grabbing him by the ear and saying, "Steve Sadler, I really think it's time for you to be interviewed for the consumption of the masses." And Steve Sadler said yes. So, hello, Steve.
Hello. Good to see you.
Good to be seen, man. I'm glad we could drag you out of retirement and prop you up in front of a camera. And
Absolutely. Honored to be a part of the series.
Yeah, it's cool, man. We were talking a second ago about Jeff Clayton's many protestations about how there will never be an ANTiSEEN documentary, but instead we've ended up with, I think it's gone beyond mini-series now. I think it actually qualifies as like a 26-week, one-season series at least.
They just flood the market. There's bound to be some truth in there somewhere.
Oh, we certainly hope. So let's talk about you and your band and the aforementioned almighty ANTiSEEN. I recently learned, thanks to you, about a band that you were in before ANTiSEEN.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to do a little self-promotion as well, including sending you information.
Well, by all means, sir. Let's send everybody some information about this really, and I think really cool band that you were in when you were just a wee lad.
Yeah, around like 14. That was the junior high school band, the Generics, and we everybody liked music a lot where I was living around, and ended up taking up instruments. Two of my brothers played. One played guitar and one played drums, so that was around the house. So I ended up kind of messing around with that and finding some other guys that had similar interests, and our immediate thought was to write our own songs instead of playing other stuff, which has kind of been my preference ever since. And we ended up, with the help of my brothers again, going into an actual recording studio, which I didn't appreciate until later how nice it really was. And the recording studio had this deal where you could record songs and then pick a couple and they would press a 7-inch, which ended up happening with 2 songs by this band, the Generics. And we did 200 of them, sold them mostly to people we knew. And then by the time some momentum started happening, and my family ended up having to move from West Virginia to South Carolina, so that ended that band. And then, so that's 1983. And I guess about a year ago, I got contacted by somebody because I had, at age 14, registered the trademark, the copyright for this record. So I got this email saying, not sure if you're the right guy, but I looked up this copyright, are you associated with this band? And and he had just found it in a bin and thought it might be interesting and took a chance on it. And then, like I say, ended up contacting me and connected me with some other people. And I sold him some copies that I had had in a warehouse forever, like you do, and ended up getting some interest in it. And now there's going to be a reissue with 2 additional songs that we were able to pull off the demo cassette from that session.
Wow, that's intense. The fact that you, at the age of 14, went through the trouble to copyright the name.
Yeah. I registered the copyright, and I did the thing that you always heard the myth about, that if you mailed it to yourself in a sealed envelope, it would be protected. I don't know if you ever heard that one, that provided some kind of protection, or I don't know why I felt like I needed to go through all that paperwork, but it's been a theme throughout my life to do unnecessary paperwork, but usually ends up paying off.
Well, in this case, it certainly did. Now, I just want to backtrack for 1 second, because I had always heard about I guess they called it the poor man's copyright, where you that's not true. That's actually doesn't guarantee anything.
Well, sorry, not to speak lawyer, but it depends. So yeah, it does. It's supposed to be protected from point of creation. So if you have some evidence, that you're the creator and the time frame of when it was created. So yeah, I don't know that it's ironclad, but it's in that definitely better than nothing category.
Right, because
I haven't been involved in that kind of conflict, thankfully, but
thankfully, especially in the music biz, it's almost inevitable, really.
Yeah.
It's funny because I did that with an ANTiSEEN side project that I think you were around for at the time, the Rawhead 7-inch, which was Greg Clayton's band. And at the exact same time we did the Rawhead 7-inch, some other artiste had a project called Rawhead. So I, of course, took the Rawhead 7-inch, put it in an envelope, mailed it to myself via certified mail, and they put the postmark all over it with the date and everything, and I stuck it on a shelf, and that's about where it stayed for the next 30 years.
Well, the other interesting thing is if you don't have, world domination ambition, you can get away with a certain amount, because obviously there are at least 14 other bands called the Generics now, so putting out a record by the Generics is not going to make it any more unique than it was in 1983. But yeah, hopefully if you can carve out this little small area that's not bothering anybody that is trying to control the whole industry, you can get away with it. I guess it amuses me sometimes how the lengths that major label bands will go to crush someone that's just trying to play around their state, or
Yeah, well, don't even get me started on the major labels and
right.
Their little trickeries.
Yeah.
Having been the aforementioned record store owner for 20 whatever. How many years was it? You'd think I'd have that memorized by now. 28 years or whatever it was. I've seen them all. I'm sure you've seen a few too. Yeah, major labels.
Well, I do. As you were mentioning, I do remember the brick and mortar store, because I think I was doing sound then when they, if I remember correctly, did an in-store there, and that's where the Animals Don't Eat Them sticker.
Oh yeah.
Born and.
Okay, so you were there that fabled day.
Yeah.
Ah, okay, cool. We'll get into that then. We'll totally get into that, because that was part of a really interesting and nefarious, debauched time for rock and roll and the scene, if you will,
right,
in general. That was a lot of fun. So then, okay, we've established now that you moved from West Virginia.
That's right.
With the Generics, which I must say, the sound of that record is anything but generic.
Good.
It was cool, and actually, I want to know, man, because you guys at such a young age and in a place like West Virginia came up with like a really unique sound, especially with the spoken vocal approach and everything. How'd you all come up with that?
Oh, thanks. Good. I don't have a good answer. I mean, some of it was stuff that we did on purpose, and then, you know, like so often happens, some of it just was a consequence of the recording. Part of, I think, what actually made it more interesting than what we would have done if we knew what we were doing was that the vocal mix when we did the vocals in the headphones was too loud. So it actually made us sing a little softer than we normally would have. But because I have like some practice tapes and stuff, which were, you know, a little more aggressive, but then that lent it a little more to the back and forth. And we ended, you know, we accidentally, like say, did the write what you know thing. I mean, we literally wrote about friends that we had, or, you know, their families or things that had happened to us. So it was all, you know, a very direct experience kind of thing. So some of them were actual conversations, and some of them, you know, were fictionalized, I guess.
Love it. Yeah, the whole bit about walking the dog.
Yeah.
Laurie Anderson, eat your heart out.
Exactly. Yeah, which I'm a big fan of her, but I was a little too early. I've often been accused of borrowing from people I had not heard of yet. So
yeah, right. It's the dangers of being ahead of the curve.
right. Well, and I was lucky even then to be surrounded by people that probably knew, well, definitely knew a lot more about music than I did. I mean, that was definitely true in ANTiSEEN, that I was the least musically educated person in the band. But even back in '83, I was lucky to be around people that, you know, had these bigger record collections than I ever ended up having, and, you know, this depth of musical experience that, you know, you could lay something simple on top of, and they knew what to do with it. I've been really fortunate with that.
Yeah, definitely, and especially at that time at such an early age, you know, when you're just starting to learn about music and
Right.
everything in general, it's always really nice to have that kind of a mentor or someone to help you find
And
your
I'm
way like
very
that.
proud that my guitar playing has not progressed at all since then. I've been able to preserve that level of playing.
Right. that certain authenticity.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, the guitarists that I looked up to were, you know, like Gang of Four and people like that. So I mean, I never had any ambitions to um, play these complicated things. I like the sounds more, which is thinking about talking to you today. That was one of the things that I liked so much about Joe and Tom both. I mean, it was so much about the sound and the feel and the power of what was going on, that, you know, and the songwriting was great too, but just the full experience of it. And you guys have that too. You've been able to hold on to that, which is amazing.
Yeah, well, that's actually come up a lot when I'm talking to other former members of the band. The fact that the vision of this thing is like so consistent and so well defined, and in spite of what some people might think, so rooted in art, you know, and in concept, that you really, I mean, you can't go wrong with it, and there's no need to change it.
Right.
And that's one of those things that one is constantly aware of. At least I was constantly aware of when, you know, I got the call to be in the band. It's like, you know, it wasn't my job to bring in, you know, fiddly bass guitar solos or a great big like Geddy Lee sized effects unit,
Right.
and, you know, try to do temples of syrinx or anything. It's to step into this slot and play ANTiSEEN music.
Right.
Which I would
And
imagine. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, just in my experience, you know, I was coming in after Doug Throckmorton, which was big shoes to fill, and just an amazing drummer. I mean, I'm still a big fan of his drumming. So, you know, I never thought I would be playing like him, and everyone was kind enough not to tell me that I had to play like him. You know, they were kind enough, like say, to recognize that I was interested in the same aesthetic, even if I couldn't pull off the exact same feel of any of the past members, which, like I say, is interesting to me, and the longevity of the band, even with member changes, that they're able to preserve, what it really feels like, and to the point that it's still instantly recognizable, even on a record, definitely live.
Yeah, totally. And I think that fits into the whole, like, every member does bring something to the table, but it's got to survive the great big veto stamp,
Right.
as wielded by Jeff Clayton.
Right. And I mean, he's not bashful to say someone has to be in charge. I mean, someone does have to make final decisions. So
Yeah. Otherwise, you end up being, I don't know. I can't think of any, really, you can't think of any effective band that there has ever been where there wasn't a strong leader.
Right.
I mean, like even Crass, like the much vaunted anarchist collective Crass, they had a leader. Their drummer, Penny Rambeau, was the absolute leader of Crass. So there you go.
It is a reality can't escape.
Yeah. But you did manage to escape West Virginia, or you
Yes.
were escaped from West Virginia,
Yep.
such as it were.
So all good things with me, thankfully, and South Carolina worked out well, and ended up in what a lot of people might also find to be an unlikely place to fall into punk music in Myrtle Beach. But being a tourist town, it had a lot of interesting sort of underbelly, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but you would have these huge numbers of people that would come in during tourist season, and then outside of the tourist season, it was just this really small town where you had an opportunity to really get to know a lot of people. And there were a couple of people, this Daryl Watts in particular, who you may know, just managed to bring in some amazing bands to, like, say, which was really a small town, like DOA and of course ANTiSEEN, but just all sorts of big name bands. Even at the time, he managed to get in, and then of course he had several really good bands too, Bazooka Joe and several others. So It was, again, interesting. I managed to find some people that were doing bookings as well as shows, and I started doing sound for the shows that they were putting on. So that gave me an opportunity, to learn more about doing sound, and also to kind of get mixed in more with the bands. The band I had at the time, Scott Free, I'm pretty sure sometimes we got booked just so I would do sound. I'm sure that's no secret, but that worked out okay. And that's what actually ended up getting me to do sound with Antiscene, was doing one of those shows where Scott Free was playing that show, and that was set up by Daryl Watts too at this just bar that would have absolutely no interest whatsoever in the bands that were playing, except that somehow Daryl managed to bring enough people in that they would sell a lot of beer that night. But
right.
The other 6 nights of the week would be something totally different.
A bunch of bullshit, most likely.
Right. But he had, again, fortunate with Daryl that he was, like Jeff in a lot of ways, and Joe even more, where, he could kind of walk into a room and instantly make friends with people, even people that might look at him sideways at first. If you come in and are just yourself and friendly, most people are going to respond positively.
Right. And that kind of answers that question, because Myrtle Beach and Charlotte are not within walking distance of each other.
Right.
So I often wondered how that connection was made.
Yeah, I was thinking back, the best I can tell, that show that they did at this club Rave, which ended up being the release of My God Can Beat Up Your God, which you might be familiar with.
Yeah.
Was sort of what I call the first time I did sound for them, because they were playing and I was just the person that was already there doing sound. And I was in the habit of doing recordings of the shows, and it just happened that it came out pretty good. And I mean, of course, they played great that night too. And my memory was Jeff Young okayed me. Yeah, it was he also, the people that surrounded the band had sometimes more input than I think a lot of people realize. Like Jeff Young definitely could step back and say, hey, okay, this sounds okay. I mean, I did some effects on Surfing Bird, but I didn't go nuts with crazy effects and all this stuff on the other songs, and kept them sounding like Antiscene instead of what a lot of soundmen like to do, which is just make every band sound exactly the same.
Yeah, and almost always to the detriment of the band's sound. It's like, how much gated reverb do you really need?
Right. Yeah.
But that's interesting that that already puts, I'm not blowing smoke, this is just from years and years of bitter experience, that you knew to put effects on Surfing Bird.
Right.
That's right away, you get points for that.
Yeah, it's sort of like if in any of that, a lot of that I like, and I was a big Cramps fan already too, so that helped. But I did like a digital delay, well used but not overused.
Right on. Do you still got the tape of that show?
I don't have I think I surrendered the original for that record.
All right, so it's out there somewhere. I'm the diehard, perennial, incorrigible archivist. I need to know these things exist somewhere.
There are probably some live tapes that I have that might be playable, because I certainly didn't go to the lengths that you went to, but certainly, whenever I was doing sound, I would always record just in case. And if people weren't interested, then I would just keep it. And so I do have actually I have some other bands that you might be interested in that have just been sitting around, because I got in the habit of just recording music on one side and vocals on the other side. And that way, if ever wanted to do something with it later, you could actually mix it, because most of it straight off the board tapes, were balanced based on the room, which again, Antiscene as an example, I mean, it would have been all vocals if otherwise.
Right, interesting. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that at a later date.
It'll get me digging through stuff. I don't quite have the work ethic you do on finding stuff and putting it to use, but.
Well, I'm a highly mobile guy. If you need someone to come in and, organize your garage, you just let me know.
You have like a mobile vehicle you can park out front and just pick up boxes.
Yeah, and I'll run a cable in from the Subaru to the tape deck, whatever it takes. We'll figure it out.
Sounds good.
So there you go. You've established yourself. You recorded the bands. They thought it was good enough to release. What then?
Well, I was interested in traveling with a band, and that I don't remember exactly how it all ended up fitting together, but that was sort of what they were looking for too. Somebody that was willing to travel, with a pretty flexible schedule, which I had, thankfully. So I mean that worked out. I don't have a good list of all the shows I did sound for. But, a couple of those, the tours where they would go to Northeast or a particular region, that kind of thing. So I got to do several shows with them that way.
Right. And then let's clarify too, what's the lineup of the band at this point?
This is Jeff and Joe and Tom and Doug Throgmorton on drums.
Okay. Got it. So wait, you didn't come up with them in 1989, did you?
I think so. I mean, because I was I was looking back at some of the recording dates and some of that stuff. There's some stuff that was going on that I've heard you and Jeff and other members talk about that I wasn't really aware of, because I always ended up kind of on the edges So there's a lot of like, oh, well, you must have known so and so. It's like, no, I'm sorry, I wasn't involved in that for whatever reason. But yes, my understanding is that Ray's show with My God Can Beat Up Your God was in October of '89, and then some point after that, I started traveling with him whenever I could.
Okay, so that, all right, so then you wouldn't have been, because the first trip up to the Northeast was, I think, May of '89.
Oh, okay.
So, all right, we got our chronology there. So that's cool, because you, when you first became like the permanent sound man, that's when things were like really starting to happen as far as road work and lots of recording and whatnot.
Yeah, it seems like it, and definitely looking back, I mean, and they were already doing a lot of recording and already had a lot of stuff kind of ready to go. I was fortunate in that too.
Yeah, yeah. So how long then did your stint as sound man last?
Well, I was trying to figure out dates. I don't have really good start and stop dates. I think I started playing drums in summer of '91. That doesn't sound quite right, does it?
Oh, I don't know. You're asking someone who's probably almost as bad
No,
with
90.
dates.
Yeah, it'd be August of '90. I'm saying because I was looking back there because I actually did end up eventually moving to the Charlotte area,
Okay.
and with the intention to be able to play with them all the time and to tour more.
Right, right. So what was it that led you to actually assuming the drum throne?
Well, one of the tours, like I say, I don't have good dates or information. I know it's been talked about a couple of times. It was one of the Northeast tours with Doug, and I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but from what I can gather from everybody else's story of what was going on there, that he just wasn't really happy about traveling and being away from home, which I mean I did witness that part. but it just became a situation where he wasn't interested in traveling as much as everybody else wanted to, and so they did auditions. I have no idea how many other people or how that all went, but I was definitely interested, and I've never asked Jeff about it, but I always assumed that I had an unfair advantage because I knew like the new songs, like I knew some of the old songs of course too, but I remember at the the audition that I did, we played Kill the Business and a couple of the other things that they had just recorded or had just put out because they were playing it on the shows that I was doing sound for. So, I mean, there are always old songs that everybody has a soft spot for, but there is a kind of energy in like the new songs. So if you can step into like the current material, I think that gave me an advantage. I don't know if that had anything to do with it at all. I could be totally wrong about that, but
yeah, I don't know.
That seemed to be kind of when it clicked. Is like, okay, we can play the set that we've been playing with me playing drums. I think that helped.
Yeah, while at the same time being able to advance the cause of the new songs, new recordings. Right. You've actually got something you can add
right.
the new stuff and create.
And at that time, I think they thought I would be easy to travel with because I had been a relatively nice guy up to that point.
Up to that point. So what happened?
A false sense of security that everything would go smoothly.
Well, there are some stories that did get told in past broadcasts.
Yeah, there has been things come up in video and print that I may have had some anger issues. I don't.
Oh, maybe that. I mean, something about a bus I heard about.
Oh no, I definitely blew up the bus. Yeah, that was that was very unfortunate. Yeah, that was a very reckless, hasty, illogical thing to do.
Yeah.
To drive a very large bus at very high speeds, but.
And they didn't kick you out of the band. That's something I've always kind of marveled at.
Well, we rented a car and drove back to Charlotte and got my van, which was running on like one cylinder,
Really?
and managed. I mean, I had absolutely no knowledge whatsoever about cars, but somehow I could open that thing up and talk it into working. So we ended up using my old, whatever that was, like I think a 1972 GMC passenger van that was, like, say, well past its prime. So
Yeah.
we drove to Charlotte and then drove that all the way back to try and salvage as much as we could of that. But no, yeah, I agree with you. That would normally be the starting point of the end. I don't quite know why that wasn't it. There are things maybe that could point to the starting point of the end, but.
Well, then maybe at that time you still had the nice guy facade.
Right, yeah. I guess the effort to save the rest of the shows and hopefully helped. And then somehow they got the regular van working again. I mean, it was always sort of moving forward against all the odds.
Yeah, a common theme. Really is. So, excuse me while I cough up a lung here. So yeah, it's like you're really in the thick of things now. You've officially joined the band. How did you join the band as drummer? Because you were not necessarily a drummer, if I got my story right.
Yeah, I mean, I'd played guitar in other bands, but over the years I'd played drums because, like, say, growing up, one of my brothers had a guitar and one had drums, so they were kind of around the house, and I kept messing around with them. And there was a band prior to that, just, local band that I'd played drums in. So, I mean, it wasn't totally from left field, but my memory was, I'm pretty darn sure I didn't own a complete drum set at that point, which, again, I'm not quite sure how I talked them into saying I'm ready without a complete drum kit. Because I do remember we did several practices that went, pretty good for first practices. And there was a show coming up, I'm pretty sure it was in Chapel Hill. And they told me, they said, oh, don't worry, Doug's agreed to do the show in Chapel Hill. And I was just crushed. I was like, I was going to be ready for that show. And again, some reason they let me talk them into it. And the show was okay. I don't know if it was the best Antiscene's ever sounded, but they allowed me to talk them into letting me go ahead and start. Because I thought, we're practicing, I'm in the band, but so I may have pushed one show early on that. Sorry, Chapel Hill.
There's been a few others in Chapel Hill since then. So,
really? Yeah.
The memory might be erased by now.
Right. That's right.
So damn, what was God, I mean, because that whole period of time for them was just like so busy. It's kind of hard to think about, like, what in your mind, what were some of the highlights? I mean, we've covered some of the low lights, anger issues, blowing up the van,
right,
forcing the first gig. But what do you remember as being like really, really cool?
Just being part of the band was pretty amazing. And they, like, say, they had this whole sort of do-it-yourself enterprise built up already. I mean, that was natural to me. To me, that was the logical way to do things, because I had been around, especially doing sound, I had been around people that, had the whole plan where, they were going to write 20 songs and they were going to market them and get an agent and, do the whole thing. And then they were going to get a major label deal and life would be great and all that. And I never had any interest in that, of course. And it was just so cool to be around people that were so strongly motivated on the do-it-yourself part, but also, wanted to get into this wider audience kind of thing too. Because I remember, I'm pretty sure Doug was still in the band then, that they did a show in New York City and met with I don't remember which label it was, but my understanding is this happened a couple of times, but it made a strong impression on me at the time that they got an offer which was decent, but they had to relinquish all their publishing rights, and that was like a red line that they were not willing to cross.
No, never.
And to me, that was the reasonable thing to do. I mean, obviously most bands that are trying to make it, whatever that means, think that that's a reasonable thing to do, but that definitely was not something they wanted to do. And thankfully, because that would be just tragic to have like their whole back catalog tied up in that nonsense.
Absolutely. That I mean, publishing, if you're a band at a certain level, and you already know this, but just for anybody who's watching right now who might not know some of the ins and outs of the business, publishing, which is the money that you earn off of the use of your songs, is quite often the lifeblood of a band, especially when you reach a certain level. Imagine getting your song used in a TV commercial. That's publishing money right now. And to sign that away to some label who will then reap all of that money forever, no good, man. They don't need it as badly as you do.
No, and it's just kind of giving up this creation that you made too. I mean, to someone else's desires. So.
Yeah, and not only that, but like the what happens so often with a major label and a major label deal is the creative control that you throw away, essentially. They want you to, well, we don't like your drummer. You need a new drummer, and so bring in a new drummer. And we don't like your name. You change your name.
A very interesting example you chose.
Oh, I wasn't going to say anything.
Totally random pick of band member, right?
purely, but that's what happens.
Sure.
And I think about. And I'm actually going to be interviewing a guy from Danbury who stuck his arm in that particular machine. And they didn't get put through the ringer quite as hard, but it was still the same thing. You had to use the record company's in-house graphics department. You had to use the in-house producer or somebody that they approved. You had to use their booking agency, their tour manager, sometimes their sound man.
Right.
All this stuff, which is of course then charged to the band. The band pays for all of that, like in your standard major label deals. So it's not such a bargain.
No, it's very much just a dressed up bank loan in a lot of ways. But on the cool side of what was going on, like say, just they already had this momentum going, and like for some reason when you were talking about that, I was thinking about Jeff with the T-shirts, because I mean it couldn't have been weekly, but it seemed very frequent. That he'd show up with like a new box of T-shirts. Like, wouldn't it be cool if we did a T-shirt like that? And then there it was, and had all this stuff to where there was enough going on to where you could do the like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do that? And it would play there, and it was really great to be able to do that. And then I don't exactly know how they connected with Rave, but that opened up sort of a whole new range of possibilities too. And as I remember being in Repo Records, and they were I think it was Joe that was talking to a friend of theirs that I didn't know, and they were doing the expression of yeah, that'll happen as soon as ANTiSEEN puts out a CD.
Oh yeah, right.
Well, as a matter of fact, we'd have a CD coming out in a couple of months.
that was a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
Like really big deal. I don't think I even, in my store, I don't think I even carried CDs regularly until 1990. I don't even know what, it was 1990 something,
Yeah.
They were too expensive. They were just too expensive. Nobody really wanted them. But yeah, to put out a CD, big deal.
Of course, the vinyl was the big push, and it did come out on cassette too. I mean, don't get me wrong, but
was Was there a Southern Hostility cassette?
I have one. I think they were produced.
Really? Interesting. That's we need the internet research team to get on that and see
Yeah,
if
exactly.
there
That's right.
actually is
Yeah,
a.
there may be a lot of corrections that can
All right,
fly in
Shane.
later, but
Hold on a second. I've got within arm's reach here. I've got a Rave catalog, and which came in the copy of Southern Hostility that
okay,
we have on display here. You know, see here the Rave catalog.
right.
And it's interesting you should mention Rave because they were, I mean, they never really took off like Sympathy or Sub Pop or, Discord or some of the other bands. But they really, if you look at this catalog, they had a lot of stuff out.
Yeah.
And, provided that my signal's any good, you can see a certain ANTiSEEN 7-inch there, along with lots and lots and lots of other bands on the inside, on the outside. So it's a label who was really trying to work stuff. And they could do things like afford to press full-length vinyl and give you an insert, while at the same time, I'm assuming, not make stupid demands on the band.
Right. I mean, that was the sense I got. And I don't know to how far it went, but also kind of broadened our booking options as far as I understand too. I mean, that was Tom's domain.
Right.
I mean, he had an expertise for that even back then, but I think the connection to Rave may have opened some doors that might not have otherwise happened at that particular point. And of course, the connection to Europe, is just amazing. So I was really fortunate to be a part of that first European tour. That was quite remarkable. I mean, in the U.S. tours too, but
it's a whole other ball game. I mean, I've toured the States relentlessly for like almost the last 10 years, but I only went to Europe for the first time a little bit less than 2 years ago. And it was just like, I mean, I love touring the States. I love it. But Europe was a whole different thing. Just everything about it, the way that they treat the artists, everything from feeding you to paying you to giving you a 600-year-old carriage house to sleep in. I mean, stuff's
hope this
cool.
is okay. It's like,
I know. Yeah, it's all right. Trust me. Although, next time make it a 700-year-old carriage house. Just so you know.
But I think there was some luck in that too, in that European tour of managing to hook up with a bigger outfit than might normally have happened. I think because one of the guys at Pastel just liked the band. And I know I don't mean to make it sound so preposterous, but there, it's a pretty cool thing to be able to get on, this booking agency that is doing, sort of every band you've heard of in Europe, and you're sort of on that list and able to, place in places, like say on that first tour that as headliner that we might not have been able to do otherwise. That was my perception. Like say there other people that may have more details about how all that happened, but I remained like amazed at what they were able to pull off.
Yeah, and once again, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, under their own control.
Right.
And also what you said about T-shirts, when you think about how many bands don't have the rights to their own merchandising,
right?
Or don't have the ability to, let's crank one out this week that looks like this. I mean, so many bands just don't have that. I can't even imagine surrendering that much control, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's like say it's often just a difference between whether you're really wanting to play music or if you want some sort of concocted version of success that just happens to be in a band. I mean, because I think a lot of people approach it as, this career choice almost, instead of like, if I could play music and a couple of people show up and enjoy it, wouldn't that be great?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I sometimes will lament it, like if I'm in Phoenix, Arizona on a Tuesday night playing to 2 people,
Right.
But you know what? I'm still playing my own music. There's no radio consultant who told me that my latest
Right.
song, that they won't even release my latest song because they don't hear a hit.
Right. Right.
You know, I just terrible, terrible. Much better to be in the trenches. And when you think about ANTiSEEN going on 37 years, like how many bands are able to maintain it for
Yeah.
that long? You know?
Well, and that, like say, that was another part of their outlook that I really liked is that it wasn't a head count kind of thing, because the people that however many people came to see were always either enthusiastic to see the band, or at the end were converted.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
either they left or they were converted. I mean, it made an impression. It wasn't ever what it has not ever been a band that people forget.
You know, true deal to this very day. You know, I've seen it with
Yeah.
my own two eyes. Like when we did our so far our only somewhat lengthy tour last year with I Hate God and the Obsessed. I don't know how many times I heard from people, you know, I never heard of you guys, but that was great. You know,
Right.
as they're at the merch table buying a T-shirt and buying a
Right.
CD, you know, buying a skateboard or whatever. You know, you're not going to forget it when the Destructo train comes barreling down the track and runs you right over. So, I'm trying to think of I don't know, what else do you want to say about your tenure in the band? I got a whole stack of records here that we could go through and see if you've got any memories or observations or quips or quotes.
I mean that's a reasonable thing to do. Like say, I was kind of at the beginning really caught up in what was going on, and I recognized all the creative energy was really coming from Jeff and Joe and Tom, and, doing the songwriting, all that stuff. I mean, at least in my case, I thought it was really cool that Jeff, would think that far into it. He wouldn't just bring a piece of something and say, okay, you guys do something with this. He usually had some things in mind, and he was always, willing to kind of give me some direction, that sort of thing. I mean, some of the songs, like say, by the time I came around, they had, obviously everything that ended up on Southern Hostility had already been written, and even a lot of it had even been demoed.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's a little outside of that. But even later, when they were doing new songs, he had an idea of kind of where he wanted things to go, and I enjoyed that a lot.
So how did your role as a creative force in the band evolve?
Well, I think that's a little part of the what went wrong in my situation, because I think I maybe got a little too comfortable in that, and I was genuinely I was surprised when I was let go, but I shouldn't have been. And what a cool transition that is, then to have Greg in the band,
Yeah,
who
right.
was already a great drummer, and then to have that dynamic going on too was just amazing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well,
so that all ended up being kind of the right time thing.
Since we've already stuck the fork in it, we might as well take it off the plate and hold it up for everybody to see. What was it that led to your departure from the band?
I think, upon reflection, uh, pro- probably taking it for granted a little, frankly. I mean, I did have trouble sort of managing how much time to put into the band and how much time to put into other stuff, and I didn't do a very good job of getting work outside the band that would make all that possible too. Because I went from kind of thinking that we were going to be touring all the time to then we weren't, and so that went back and forth a little bit, and I didn't manage that very well. And then also, like say, I let I didn't put enough work into the interpersonal relationships too, which is just happens.
Yeah.
But
Youth.
and that
Youth.
and you know, thankfully, you know, they had the intuition to know that I wasn't contributing enough anymore. And like I said, it definitely certainly worked out for the best because with Greg and the band, and so that was great.
Right. Right. I don't think anybody would deny it. I mean, it definitely ushered in a whole new era of the band,
Right.
for sure. Well, why don't we do this? Are you willing to talk some more about
Sure.
the records and stuff?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Because we're pretty close to the hour mark, and I like to keep each segment at an hour. So what say we wrap this particular segment of the ANTiSEEN Shoot interview series up, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the records and stuff, and you can give us the insights and the ins and outs and the yeses and nos and whatnot
Great.
involving them. Cool?
Sounds good.
All right, cool. So you heard it right there, people. That's the end of part 1 with Steve Sadler. We're going to have part 2, and it might be happening sooner than you think. So don't forget to keep on checking us out here, whether you're on the ANTiSEEN Facebook page, the Malcolm Tent Facebook page, the ANTiSEEN YouTube channel, the Malcolm Tent YouTube channel, the whatever. Doesn't matter where you are, just make sure you're there, baby, because that's where the action is when you're talking about the almighty ANTiSEEN. So, yeah. Excellent first segment, Steve. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And we'll be back. So until that time when we are back, just speaking for myself, this is Malcolm Tent saying so long from the Nutmeg State.